Alright, welcome back to the last video in this series of regional presidential predictions. I'm kind of just going to get right into it. As you can see, these states that I've colored in black, I've already done a video on. I did my first video on the West, another on the Midwest, one on the Northeast, and then this one's on the South. I'm kind of going to go in order of, safest to not safest. The South is kind of an opposite of the Northeast. Almost, I think actually I did label every single electoral vote in the Northeast going to the Democrats. Almost every electoral vote in the southern region of the United States will go to the Republicans. Let's start with Arkansas. I kind of went ahead and looked a little. Gotta go general. So a lot of these races don't have good polling. This Trump +2 is clearly wrong because Trump's going to win by a lot more than 2 in a state like Arkansas. I think it's going to be more like this 21-point margin. I don't think it'll be 33 or 35. Arkansas does have a House race that is kind of competitive that we'll look at in a House race video, which is coming soon. But certainly on the presidential level, Arkansas is safe Republican. I forgot to delete this. Arkansas is a safe Republican state. Moving on to Oklahoma. Oklahoma, another state that has a competitive House race. Let's see if we can get the D-rated polls out. Yeah, so we have Trump with a 24-point lead, making it safe. Oklahoma, big Republican state. I think Oklahoma City is one of the largest Republican cities in the U.S. Most cities are Democrat. Oklahoma City is a Republican city. Moving on to Louisiana. Yeah, so without the D-rated polls, we have a 14-point lead for Donald Trump. I think it's going to actually be around this margin. I think it could be a little higher, like in the 16 to 18 range. But I think 14-point win for the Republican is probably accurate for a state like Louisiana that isn't as red as the rest of states. Louisiana has New Orleans and Baton Rouge, which are typically Democratic voting areas. Moving on to Mississippi, another solid Republican state, but we're still going to look at the polling data. Yeah, so Mississippi has a Senate race, too, that's going to be pretty competitive. As you can see, 12.6, I think Trump will do better than 12.6 just because this is a presidential election year in Mississippi. Yeah, I think he'll do more like 15 to 17 points in the state, even though I think the Senate race in Mississippi will be a lot closer than this race. On to Alabama, and it's 9 electoral votes. Alabama obviously has that Senate race that'll be very close that we'll go into. 18 points, that seems right. Alabama's obviously a pretty Republican state, with the exception of Doug Jones, and they have one Democratic representative, but the president should win this by upwards of 15 points. Moving on to West Virginia, which isn't really a southern state, but I put it in this video. Yeah, so Trump's going to win this state by 25 to 30 points. Despite actually having a Democratic senator, West Virginia is solid Republican on the presidential level. Moving on to Kentucky, the site of another competitive Senate race. 18-point lead for Trump. That seems right, this 18 to 20 range that we're seeing here in the polls. I expect that Trump will get about that share of the vote in Kentucky. Moving on to Tennessee, which is kind of our last safe state. 14.2, that seems pretty right. Tennessee does have some urban areas like Nashville and Memphis, but it is still a pretty solid Republican state. So a 14 to maybe 16 lead seems good. All right, the rest of these states aren't safe. I kind of did the safe states first, and now we're going to move on to some not-so-safe states, starting with Texas. Texas is a state that the president won by 9 points in 2016, and then in the Senate race in 2018, the Republican Ted Cruz only won by 3 points. So Texas is trending Democrat, as we can see. Trump has a 2-point lead. I think this is going to get bigger. I think that the president will probably win the state by 3 points at minimum. I think it's going to take another presidential election cycle for the Democrats to flip Texas. They'll surely get close. They'll probably get close in a lot of House races and the Senate race there. But I don't think they're going to carry it in this election. Obviously, in a landslide scenario for the Biden campaign, Texas would go blue. However, 2 points is within the margin of error, so we never know. I'm just basing this off history, what I think, and the polling data available. Quick disclaimer about polling data. The polls were wrong in 2016. They could very well be wrong again in this election. Polling data is really all we have, so we kind of have to base our knowledge off what we know. I'm going to go next to South Carolina, which also has a pretty competitive Senate race. Here we see Trump up by 5.5. He won the state by about 14 points in 2016. I don't think he'll get 5.5. I think he'll get more like 7, which would place South Carolina as not likely, as not safe, but likely Republican, maybe even lean. I'll put it as lean just because of that Senate race. On to Virginia. Virginia, a state that was Republican for a while and has gone Democrat. It was close in 2012. It was still close in 2016. In 2018, the Democrats flipped 3 House seats there, and there's a number of competitive House races. Yeah, but Virginia is less competitive than the Midwest region. We see Biden up by 11, which means that I'm going to say that Virginia is likely. It could go into the lean category, but for now, it is likely. Moving on to North Carolina. North Carolina is a state that Obama won in 2008, and then Romney won in 2012, and Trump won in 2016. Here we see a 2-point Biden lead. I think that the Democrats can take North Carolina. Of all states, I think Ohio, North Carolina, Iowa are going to be the closest, but I'll give it a tilt Democrat margin for now, just because Joe Biden has led in every poll for a while, despite we see some Trump polls here, and the polls are pretty close within the margin of error, but I'm going to give North Carolina to the Democrats. On to Georgia. Georgia is a state that the Democrats have targeted for years. They've really been trying to flip it. I think they're going to get close, but not flip it. Georgia went to Donald Trump by 5 points in the last election. I think he'll win it by maybe 2, maybe less, but I think he'll still win it, which is why I'm going to give it the tilt margin. I think it's pretty similar to North Carolina. Biden has got a lot of good polling data out of Georgia recently, so we never know, especially because it's within the margin of error, the margin of error being 3.5. But I'm going to say that it is tilt Republican for now. Also have 2 Senate races there that'll both be competitive. Moving on to the last state, Florida, and its 29 electoral votes, a state that has decided the presidential winner for quite a long time, something that it may not do this election cycle. So Biden has gotten some better polls out here. It looked like for a while that this state was trending Trump, but apparently, a 3-point lead is nothing to, 3.6 is not, it's technically out of the margin of error. However, this state's going to be closer than 3.6. I think that, I'm going to say that it is tilt Democrat. I really want to put it toss-up because Florida, we really never know, especially because the Republican Party is doing much better among minorities in Florida. But Florida, I'm going to say that it's tilt Democrat. Alright, that is all for this video. Here we have Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, and West Virginia. Safe Republican. No likely Republican. Texas and South Carolina as lean. Georgia as tilt for the Democrats. Likely in Virginia. And tilt in North Carolina and Florida. The South will be a very competitive region as we get closer to the election, similar to the Midwest. And states like Florida have the potential to decide this election entirely. So this is the end of my region by region prediction. In the next few videos, I'm going to do a Senate prediction, which I haven't done in a while. I'm going to do another just straight up presidential prediction, and then we get into the House races. One unique video I'm planning on doing is I'm planning on kind of telling you guys like what goes down on election night or what's gonna go down on election night. Kind of a guide for those of you who watch the TV, see the returns come in, and don't really know what's going on. Alright, that is all for this video.